Here's what I can tell you about Kyle Allen. Look, he's averaging under 3.5 yards per carry for 3 straight. He's got 2 receptions.
The new Cam Akers.
He's got 2 receptions on the year. Like, he's not involved in passing game, but here's what I can tell you about Kyle Allen. He qualifies at running back. And in some leagues, that's all you need. Like, he's a live body. He's a warm body. He's somebody that qualifies at the running back position in your fantasy football league. And they're going to run. Atlanta is going to run. It does not matter what the score is. It does not matter what the game script is, what the down distance is. They're going to run. They're getting their ass kicked last week in Cincinnati. Marcus Mariota threw it 13 times. And that's probably more than Arthur Smith wanted.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. I can't promise that'll be the end of the Falcons jokes for the day.
In fact, I can actually make the opposite promise. There'll be many more Falcons jokes to come. Lawrence Jackson, Lord Don't Lose, he's going to join us later in the show, and he's a diehard Falcons fan. So my assumption here is there'll be a lot more Falcons jokes. What there won't be any more of, Connor Rogers, is Apple jokes. It took me 2 days. I just want to point out there, we have a beautiful sign there now, Applebee's Grill and Bar. We love our friends at Applebee's because they agreed with me. The apple was too big. The apple was too big for the set. We love the Applebee's. It was just, we needed a smaller apple.
All you do is make moves.
I'm just telling you. It took me 2 days. We got rid of the apple. But anyway, what I will say here is that I now miss the apple. That's the way Connor.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes.
I was like, oh, where's the apple?
You wanted it back.
I want it back now. And now I miss the apple.
Well,
and
tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's going to take me longer to get the apple back than it was for me to get rid of the apple. But I'll just say, anyway, so we're thrilled. We're thrilled to be back here on the Fantasy Football Happy Hour, served proudly by Applebee's. I made up the proudly. I don't know if they're proud to serve it or not. But
we're proud.
They are still here with us, which we appreciate very much. Here's what I'm going to tell you real quickly. A lot of news off the top, right? A lot of news off the top.
The last hour.
In the last hour, just as we've been prepping this show. Like, I thought, well, we're probably going to do 10 minutes on the apple being missing. You know what I mean?
We will. We'll get there.
But, a lot of fantasy news to get to, our Rotoworld headlines. So let's dive in right now for week number 8.
Yeah, Rotoworld headlines, and no more important place to start, I think, right now than the Green Bay Packers offense.
Dude.
It's when you think things can't get worse, they keep finding a way. Allen Lazard seen wearing a sling after the game versus the Commanders, a shoulder injury. Let's just keep this real simple off the top, Barry. Where is your concern level about this offense?
Massive.
Yeah.
Let me put it another way. Aaron Jones. There you go. I've just listed. I've listed the entire Packers offense that you feel comfortable or confident in starting. It's Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is free, and that's about it. Like, as you sit here and look on the screen, in terms of here's where I've ranked my initial ranks, available on Rotoworld.com and NBCSportsEdge.com for free. Here are my ranks of the Packers this week, right? I have Rodgers outside my top 15. I have Dobbs outside my top 40. I have Tunyon outside my top 15 at tight end. I have A.J. Dillon at running back 40. The only viable starters this week in a road game against the Bills. I think you're starting Aaron Jones, and if Allen Lazard is healthy enough, again, he's been banged up. He left that game. His arm's been sitting in the sling. We'll see if Lazard suits up Sunday. But Lazard, the touchdown equity there, I think he's a viable wide receiver 3. Tre'Davious White still not going to play for the Bills. It is a good opportunity, Connor Rogers, to mention that this Sunday morning, fantasy football pregame, Michael Smith, Jay Crouch, and myself, a cast of thousands. And when I say a cast of thousands, I mean a cast of thousands Bills fans, because we're being broadcasting live from Buffalo Bills Stadium, right there in the parking lot. Come one, come all. Michael Smith is guaranteed he will jump through a flaming table.
I've seen that on Twitter multiple times.
Yeah, he keeps denying it, but I bet you we can talk him into it. We'll see. If I say it enough, if I put it out into the universe enough, maybe it eventually happens. Someone will jump. Here's what I will tell you. Someone will jump through a flaming table.
Safe guarantee.
Right.
Peer
would
pressure
you do
from
that?
the mafia.
Would you
I would absolutely do it. For
All
this
right.
show, I would do it.
All right. Connor, you're in.
for this show.
Someone hey, B. Rubes, connect me with NBC Travel. We're bringing Connor Rogers with us to Buffalo on Sunday, entirely just to jump through.
Sorry, Jets pregame. Yeah, I have some business to take care of with the Bills Mafia.
Yeah, that's it. What are you going to do? No, but in all seriousness, someone will jump through a flaming table, and we'll have a lot of fun there. So if you're in Buffalo, if you're going to the game, please come by and see us Sunday morning, 11 to 1 Eastern. If you can't be there in Buffalo, watch us on Peacock and CNBC. Packers obviously playing at the Bills in that Sunday night game that'll be right here on NBC and Peacock. Aaron Rodgers doesn't seem – in general, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is like the happiest guy in the world.
It's pretty far from it.
Right, but I feel like this week more than ever he's a little testy.
Let me throw something at you. The Packers-Bills game, which reminder, you will be there. Everybody should be watching that. They are 12-point underdogs, Green Bay, at Buffalo. That is the first time the Packers will be double-digit underdogs in Aaron Rodgers' career. His career. Let's hear from Aaron Rodgers after last week's borderline disaster.
I'm not worried about this squad. In fact, this might be the best thing for us. This week, nobody's going to give us a chance. Going to Buffalo and Sunday Night Football, the chance to get exposed, might be the best thing for us.
You think there's a widespread belief in the locker room? That's your belief.
That what?
Is that a widespread belief in your locker room? Obviously, that's your belief.
That what?
That you guys can get it turned around and no concern here about the squad.
I mean, it should be. Unless they don't think they're the right person for the job. I think I'm the right person for the job. So I'd have to ask them.
Rodgers had more to say yesterday by saying, guys who are making too many mistakes shouldn't be playing. Got to start cutting some reps. Maybe guys who aren't playing, maybe give them a chance. Barry, who do you think he's talking about here?
Pretty much everyone that isn't Aaron Jones.
That's what it feels like.
I don't know. Like, does this mean more Christian Watson, more Sammy Watkins? I don't know. I don't know who he's talking about, but I also think it sort of doesn't matter. Like, we want to see more increased touches for A.J. Dillon. That would be interesting to me. But I don't think there's a pass catcher beyond Allen Lazard that's super interesting. Romeo Doubs is a nice player, and he's running a bunch of routes, so maybe he's talking about Watson over Doubs or something like that, or Watkins. Randall Cobb's hurt. But this offense is so, conservative and dysfunctional that nothing here really makes me feel like, wow. Like, I wish this guy would get a shot.
That's the issue,
right?
I
You know
see.
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And certainly not against Buffalo.
Let me throw one more at you.
Yeah, what do you got?
Do you think this is a passive-aggressive classic Aaron Rodgers, I'm asking for the front office to make some kind of trade?
Probably.
That the guys out there are not cutting it. There's not much behind them, like you said. Go do something. This isn't working.
This isn't working. Yeah, that's very possible as well. It wouldn't be surprising. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to see the Packers make a move, except for the fact the Packers never make a move. Like they never make a trade. They almost never make a trade or anything like that. Having said that, like they've got $150 million invested in Aaron Rodgers. They let Devontae Adams go, and so yeah, I mean, I think and part of the conversation in terms of him coming back. And Aaron Rodgers coming back to Green Bay was that he would have more of a say in personnel and decisions. So, yeah, here's the two things I can tell you. For this Sunday's game, the only Packer you feel confident about starting is Aaron Jones, and I think Lazard is viable if you're, as a wide receiver 3 with some warts, right? And Tanyan's in there as a, touchdown-dependent tight end too, mid-tier tight end too. And that that's the only thing I can say, and that we will also just see how this plays out. That's the only guy you're starting this week, and then we'll see what happens Sunday and if the Packers end up making any moves before the November 1st trade deadline.
Another team we have a close eye on for different reasons, injury-related reasons, is the Baltimore Ravens. Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman did not practice Tuesday. Andrews with the shocking no-catch performance from last weekend. Bateman's been dealing with a left foot injury, it feels like, the entire year at this point. But let's start with Andrews here, Barry. Short week at Tampa Bay. Last week's performance, the most disappointing we've seen from him in a long time. Is there any long-term concern here, or do you think that was a fluky week?
Very fluky week, right? He was a little bit banged up. They only threw it 16 times in this particular game here. So I think Mark Andrews, I cannot imagine a scenario in where you would ever bench Mark Andrews. You're starting him. I have him as my number one tight end this week, obviously with Travis Kelce on a bye here. Tight ends against Tampa Bay have had success. They've given up the top 10 most receptions to opposing tight ends. They're 9th in most touchdowns allowed to opposing tight ends as well. They're banged up in the secondary, Connor. So, yeah,
they just look bad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, DJ Moore came back to life against this
resurrected.
Tampa Bay. Right, was resurrected against secondary. Whatever. Last week was just an anomaly. It was just a weird game. They ran a bunch more than they have pretty much this entire year. They didn't throw very much. Andrews had one end zone target. I think if he comes down with it,
changes everything.
Yeah, so anyway, no. Again, literally my number one tight end for this week.
All right. Once again, we mentioned Rashad Bateman did not practice Tuesday. It seems like a reoccurring theme with the foot injury at this point. Obviously, Bateman has not lived up to where he was drafted expectations, both in the fantasy world and in the real world. This guy was a former first-round pick, was expected to come in and be the wide receiver one there in Baltimore. Is there any upside left for Bateman, or do you think this is just a constant issue?
Sure. Look, again, I mean, like, if you go back to last week, like, it wasn't a great game, but they only threw it 16 times. He actually led all pass, certainly all wide receivers in passing. I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but I believe he actually led the team in receiving. Again, it was, low bar to clear. They only threw it 16 times, but still. The problem with Rashad Bateman has been volume. Like, he's out there on a ton of snaps. He's running a bunch of snaps. He's running a ton of routes. The problem is volume. Like, he's been just a big play guy, which we sort of saw with Marquise Brown. I'm at wide receiver 35 this week, so I have him as a mid-tier wide receiver 4. Again, we just talked about the Buccaneers secondary is beat up. They've allowed the 10th most receptions to opposing wide ends. If you're looking for wide receivers, I should say, if you're looking for a positive here. But yeah, I mean, since he's come back from the foot injury, he's playing under 60% of the snaps. He has yet to have more than 5 receptions in a game, right? I mean, and they just haven't gone super pass heavy recently like they were earlier in the year. And so Bateman, who's had some splashy plays and has that ability in him, he's a little more boom or bust than we would like at this point because the volume hasn't been there. He still has big playability. I still believe in his talent. I'm certainly not dropping him, but I think he is he's kind of if we were doing beer goggles on Sunday morning, I would say, like, I need 3 beers and a shot to,
not the
at
worst.
least 3 beers, not the worst.
Good, nice buzz.
Right, good healthy buzz to start him, but like I don't need to be blackout drunk to start him. So again, I think he is a risk-reward wide receiver in week number 8.
Moving over to the Broncos, Russell Wilson limited at practice Wednesday with that hamstring injury. He has said, "I'm ready to rock." Let me read this one to you from this morning. Russell Wilson worked out, and this is from Zach Stevens on Twitter. Yeah. Russell Wilson worked out and stretched for 4 of the 8 hours on the flight from Denver to London. Said he was doing high knees in the aisle when the rest of the guys were asleep.
Yeah, good times.
Must be great to fly with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it must be really fun.
When you want to catch some
yeah,
Z's.
Exactly. Don't you have a private plane? Do you have to go with us? Can't you?
Yeah, you have enough money.
Come on.
Fly private.
Yeah, that must have been super annoying. But anyway, whatever. We said last week, we said, hey, Brett Rippon might be an improvement over Russell Wilson. Nope. That's not the case. No. All is forgiven. Russell Wilson, please come back. We're sorry we said anything. Russell Wilson is the big apple of the NFL. We made fun of it, but now we miss Russell Wilson. So we want to welcome him back. And I miss my big apple. I miss him. We named him. We decided we were going to name him.
Saw the text.
Yeah, Marlon McIntosh.
It's unbelievable.
That's a good name.
It's spot on.
Yeah,
it's very on brand for the show.
Very, very on brand. Anyway, shout out to Steven D'Agostino, who I believe that was his suggestion. Certainly was not mine. Anyway, someone get in my ear if I got that wrong in terms of who came up with that. We miss Marlon McIntosh. Anyway, we also miss Russell Wilson here. I think that he'll be better for Courtland Sutton, who partially, I think his down game last week was due to Sauce Gardner.
Sure.
Played really well as well. But I think Russell Wilson being back is helpful. I don't feel great about him this week. I have him at QB 15, as you see there on your screen. My ranks of the Broncos this week for the London game against the Jags. I have Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 36. Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray both in the 30s at running back. Courtland Sutton, though, is wide receiver 21 for me. I do think he's a borderline wide receiver 2 in this one. My Jaguars still play good defense, and it's a low volume offense there in Denver. But to the extent you've been using either of these guys, Russell Wilson being back, I think, is better than having Brett Rippon under center.
What do we think about the new kid on the block and Greg Dulcich at tight end? It feels like with that ranking, he is a viable play for you, and if you're really desperate at tight end, since he's been top 10 tight end for you, is that correct? Okay, so you are high on Dulcich right now.
Yeah, I have him at tight end 10 for the week. Over the last 2 games, he's actually been a top 9 fantasy tight end in terms of fantasy points per game. He's playing 65% of the snaps. He's running a route on 70% of his snaps.
Yeah, that's
so he's out there a lot. He's a really athletic guy, 3rd-round pick out of UCLA.
Yeah, big-time pass catcher.
Yep. Yeah, big time. So I think they like him, and just as they're searching for offense there in Denver, Dulcich is sort of interesting here as well, against the Jaguars, who, have struggled somewhat, right? I mean, they've struggled somewhat against the tight end. I think that's an area of the field you can attack against Jacksonville. So, Dulcich, I mean, again, it's a low bar to clear to be a viable tight end these days. He's a top 10 play for me this week against the Jags.
All right, well, speaking of those Jags, we know what the James Robinson trade does for Travis Etienne, but I think the trickle effect of that is, what does it do for JaMycal Hasty? Is he a running back that should now be on the radar for fantasy managers with James Robinson out the door?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, Doug Peterson likes to use multiple running backs. Obviously, Travis Etienne is still he's a home run hitter. I think he'll be used more in the passing game than we saw last week. That was sort of a little bit weird here. But through the first 6 weeks of the season, Etienne never saw more than 53% of the snaps. Over the first 6 weeks, James Robinson actually averaged 50% of the snaps. Again, I think it's probably 70-30. 65-35, 75-25. It's clearly Etienne's backfield, and he's going to get the majority of work. But given both Etienne's injury history and Peterson's desire to use multiple running backs, JaMycal Hasty suddenly becomes interesting in deeper leagues. And certainly, because Etienne's rostered in 100% of leagues, I think he is important insurance with no James Robinson there if you have Etienne on your team.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by him as a stash just because as great as Etienne looks recently, even at Clemson, his peak in college, he was never a 20-plus carries guy every week. It's just not his style of play. So Hasty could find his way into a somewhat important role with an Etienne injury. Another update here, Elijah Moore, not active, did not travel with the team to Denver last week. Expected to be active versus the Patriots. Robert Saleh this morning just said, we're all good. We'll see if we can get him the ball and make a few plays. This is not a high-functioning pass offense right now. Elijah Moore wasn't really doing much with Flacco or Zach Wilson, but it is good news that he's at least active and back with the team.
Yeah, I suppose so. If you've been hanging on to him, and maybe they're trying to showcase him for a trade,
exactly.
We'll see. So listen, if you've hung on to him at this point, if you hung on to him through last week when he wasn't active, he wasn't even really with the team, I think you're continuing to hang on to him. I don't think you're starting him this week against the Patriots. You don't feel good about that. But certainly things trending in the right direction for Elijah Moore. Last thing for me here in terms of the news, actually a couple of things real quickly here. Number one is that Ezekiel Elliott, it's being called a knee sprain by Mike McCarthy. He will not practice today. We don't know if he'll miss any time, but just worth noting, he got banged up last week as well. But Zeke is one of those guys that, again, he partially tore his PCL last year and continued to play. Either his PCL or his MCL, one of his CLs.
Something in a knee.
Yeah, he partially tore something last year and still played. One of the toughest guys out there. But just worth noting, it's classified as it is classified as a knee sprain per Mike McCarthy, but it's not the same injury as the PCL sprain in 2021. So, and he's not going to practice by the way, James Robinson, speaking of Travis Etienne in that Jacksonville Jaguars backfield, he passes physical. He's slated to practice today, according to our friend Rich Cimini of ESPN.com. And then I think that's about it for news. That's really,
Zeke missing a game, how high would that bump Tony Pollard up? in the rankings for you. I mean, that has to be a boost like no other, right? Just because of how short his workload is when Zeke plays.
He'd be a top 10 play. I mean, they're home to the Bears. You can run on the Bears. Obviously, Chicago traveling on a short week after the game and in New England on Monday night. And so, look, I mean, for everything that went wrong for the Patriots offense, they still, Ramondre Stevenson had a big game there. I would think Tony Pollard would be a top 10 play if Zeke were to miss time. That's not the expectation, but it is worth mentioning because, again, he does have a knee sprain. He did miss Wednesday's practice, so we will see there. What do you got?
One last update. Russell Gage is out Thursday night against the Ravens. Julio Jones is a game-time decision.
Okay, there you go.
Keep coming.
We're all game-time decisions. We'll talk Tom Brady. We'll talk about that game coming up. And you know what else is coming up? Lawrence Jackson at Lord Don't Lose. My buddy. He'll be here when we return.
It's your boy Lord Don't Lose right here, and this is my partner right here, Matthew Berry. He ain't got no wrestling nickname, but we talking to you, Arthur Smith, head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. You better get Kyle Pitts the ball in week 3.
You spent the 4th overall pick of the 2021 draft on this guy. You didn't take Jamar Chase, you didn't take Jalen Waddle, you didn't take Marcus Parsons. You could have had any of them. Instead, you spent it on Kyle Pitts to do what?
NGM got Kyle Pitts over under at 46.5 receiving yards. They got him at 3.5 catches. We want to hit the over on that, and it can't happen without you, Arthur Smith.
We can beg, we can plead, we can do a fundraiser. You need to do a GoFundMe. What does it take to get Kyle Pitts the ball? That's what I need to ask you. What do we need to do to get Kyle Pitts the ball?
You throw to Brian Edwards in double coverage at Jalen Ramsey when you got Kyle Pitts over there just all by his lonesome in single coverage. Now you say it's not fantasy football, and I understand that. You said you're trying to win. What did you win? You won nothing. You want to win? Put Kyle Pitts in. Let him know, big dog.
I'll tell you what you didn't win. The hearts of America. The hearts of Falcons fans, the hearts of Kyle Pitts' mom. I'll tell you, you didn't win any of that. All you won was 2 losses. That's right. And I don't even know if that makes sense. You won losses because that's all you've got to show for yourself, Arthur Smith. Free Kyle Pitts.
And he go off in week 3. We just going to say, woo!
He's going to say that. I'm an old man. I promise I did that.
Guys, I don't think anything has more shelf life than that video at this point.
Listen, watching it back, I just realized just how old I am. You know what I mean? How good Lawrence is and how old I am. But what I will say is that you were right about the shelf life. Lawrence was like, hey, let's do this video. Like, we'll just do it for 1 week. We should do it now because, we know Kyle Pitts is going to go off. And then we're here in week 8. We're here in week 8, Lawrence. Lawrence Jackson at Lord Don't Lose, joining us here, one of the fantasy experts at Rotoworld and NBC Sports.com, and lifelong Falcons fan.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, embarrassed to talk about that these days. Now, I feel like we use way too much energy on that video,
yes,
right?
Sir.
Just to get 5 catches for 87 yards. Do we have to do that every single week to get that?
We may have to. You and I, we may have to. We may have to.
Well, let's start right there for keep it open or close it out, guys. Obviously, we're talking players that you're holding on or you're just letting go.
No. This is about whether you're starting or sitting them, not necessarily dropping them. But yeah, keep it open. So these are higher end players, not necessarily dropping them, Connor.
One of
these days you should show up to the pre-show meeting. Like you stop worrying about your hair and show up to the pre-show meeting.
It's true. Anyway, I'll take the dive for that.
Right. So I'm always at the pre-show meeting because I don't have to worry about my hair. One of the nice things. Thanks. What I would say is that the idea here is like bar talk, right? Are we keeping the tab open, or are we closing it out on these players for this week, for week number 8? Are we putting them in our starting lineups? Are we keeping them in our starting lineups, or are we putting them on our bench? A couple of these guys we can talk about whether or not you should actually drop them, but the premise of the segment is, are we starting them borderline guys? Are we keeping it open and continue to start them in week 8, or are we closing it out and putting them on our bench?
So let's start with Kyle Pitts. Obviously, somebody that a lot of people everybody drafted expecting sit in the lineup at the tight end spot. You don't worry about him the rest of the year. I mean, Lawrence, are we at the point where you cannot start him in any way, shape, or form in fantasy right now, especially for this week?
Yeah, so for this week, I can't do it, boss. I cannot do it. Just like Matthew said the last episode, they was getting their ass kicked, still running. They wasn't just getting their ass kicked. They was getting whooped, embarrassed, and dumped on. But now they got the Panthers, right? They 4.5-point favorites.
Right.
So if they win, they ain't about to throw the ball. If they losing by 3 touchdowns and they throwing the ball.
Yeah, so, I mean, the one thing what I would say here is, like, I'm a tight end 12. Like, the bar for fantasy success at tight end is so low. So he's borderline for me. Like, he's averaging fewer than 4 fantasy points a game, 3 or fewer receptions in 5 out of 6 games this year. Some of the fantasy tight ends out there that have more points than Kyle Pitts this year: Daniel Bellinger, Noah Fant, Juwan Johnson, just in the last game. Literally, Juwan Johnson, I think, in the last game, when he had the 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals here. And so last week, he had 3.9 points, and you're like, wow, that was just a bad day at the office. That was the 3rd most points he's had this year. I mean, like pick a bad. Insane. Having said that, though, Lawrence, you watched that game close. You know, they targeted him on that end zone throw.
I thought it was a touchdown.
He should have been a touchdown. He got held blatantly. Once a no call as well on another pass into the end zone, where I think he would have been the guy. Like, had he not they were trying to target him in the end zone. And so I think if one of those 2 plays comes through, the narrative on him is somewhat different. But
I'd add 10 points then.
Right, right, exactly. So instead of 3.9, it's like, it's 10 points, right? It's still not ideal. I've been previously saying, like, you still got to start him. This week, again, he's outside my top 10. If you're in a 12-team league, you're starting him. If you're not, if you're in a 10-team league, I think likely there's a better option for you. Like, it's tough. They want to establish it.
We're in a world where Kyle Pitts is ranked behind Greg Dulcich coming into this week.
He just came back.
I just want to make that clear. This is his 3rd game of his career.
Yeah.
So
and they both have bad quarterback play.
Yeah. It's not pretty right now, but we're going to stay in Atlanta because we just can't get enough of this offense and talk Drake London, Lawrence, who out of the gate the first couple weeks, target monster, offensive rookie of the year, really one of the favorites for that award. He has just fallen off a cliff, and that kind of peaked last week with 1 target, 1 catch, 9 yards. This is why I started the segment this way. I'm not talking about Drake London starting this week. Are we in drop territory with him?
We getting real close to it, but you can't do it because of the talent. This week, I see me and Matthew have him similarly ranked, 46 and 47, and the reason he's that high is because of the talent and because of what we saw.
Top 10 pick.
Yeah, top 10 pick. The year before, Kyle Pitts, top 5 pick. He should have drafted like Penei Sewell or something.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's it's interesting. It's such a fascinating point. And my friend Ben Gretsch, shout out to at Yards Per Gretsch on Twitter. My friend Ben Gretsch made this point, which I thought was a really smart one. Right. So Drake London was the 8th overall pick this past year. Right. The year before, Kyle Pitts was the number 4 overall pick. So you're the front office of the Atlanta Falcons, and we used 2 top 10 overall picks on offensive pass-catching weapons, and the offense that his head coach is running out there is all run-heavy. Like, maybe he's doing that with permission, but you sort of feel like if you're the boss, if you're the front office of the Atlanta Falcons, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Like, just anyway, it'd be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season with Arthur Smith. But the fact of the matter is that the Falcons have won more games than we expected them to. The division is much worse than we thought. Falcons are tied for first.
They can
do
what they
want. 3 and 4. They're tied for first. I mean, right? Exactly. Playoff bound.
And look, they got the fool's gold call on Tom Brady a couple weeks ago to roughing the passer there. So it's a little dicey in that NFC South.
Yeah. So anyway, I agree with Lawrence here is that the talent is too much and that we saw the volume there at the early part of the season. They've gone away from that, but hopefully maybe they get back to that as well. It is worth noting the Panthers bottom 10 in the NFL in pass defense over the last 4 weeks. And I think, again, Mike Evans was wide open. 99 times out of 100, a professional NFL wide receiver, including Mike Evans, makes that catch.
Especially him.
Yep.
Especially him, walks into the end zone. Just one of those weird, just brain fart kind of plays. And so, again, we have him at wide receiver, outside of our top 45 at wide receiver this week. But it's hard for me to drop him based on the talent and potential role.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of
I get it, though, if you did. I'll say this.
Yeah, no, we ain't yelling at you.
Yeah. Right, and if I'm on, I'll say this, too. If he was on the waiver wire in your league, are you picking him up?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Just to put him on the end of the bench?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 12-team, end of the bench, just to say hi? Maybe.
Right, just to say hi. Just say whatever.
Welcome.
Hey, listen, rest of the season, Drake London or DJ Moore?
Ooh. DJ
Right.
Moore.
DJ
Moore with PJ Walker.
With PJ Walker,
That's the
exactly.
difference.
That's the world we live in here. So anyway, you're a little more bullish on Drake than I am, but we're anyway. Let's move on here.
Steelers fans were clamoring for Kenny Pickett to play. They got their wish, but that hasn't exactly worked out for Deontay Johnson. Targets still, last 2 games, 17 targets. Not like the targets have fallen off a cliff, but guys, this is dink and dunk football right here. 10 catches on those for 70 yards. Not necessarily the Deontay Johnson you're used to. Is Kenny Pickett just too unreliable right now where you're considering benching Deontay Johnson this week?
I actually wouldn't bench him this week. The Steelers are minus 10.5 point favorites, so they'll be in a situation where they have to throw, right? And then underdogs, sorry. They are the underdogs. Definitely not the favorites versus the Eagles.
Right.
And Kenny Pickett's 2 full games, he's averaging 33 completions and 48 attempts. And Deontay Johnson still only has 2 games where he's not leading the team in targets. So I'll trot him out there and just hope for that volume and hope that wins over.
Yeah, he's got a 25% target share so far this year. And one of the things we talked about, Connor, we talked about this earlier in the year when we were talking about will Kenny Pickett make this, will they make this switch, is we looked at this stretch of schedule and we're like, oh, this is like a brutal 4-game stretch for the Steelers. If they don't start him against the Jets, they should probably wait because this is just an awful stretch, and yet
they didn't listen.
They didn't listen to us at all.
They played him in the middle of the Jets game.
Right, exactly, and then it just went into that awful stretch, and this is part of that stretch. As they go, the end of this stretch, they're on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Then they have a bye, and then you feel better about their schedule with the Saints and Bengals up next. But on the road at Philadelphia, my expectation here on Deontay Johnson is I think they struggle. Pickett it's been a tough go here, and I'm with you. The passing volume is there, but even though Deontay Johnson is getting these targets, he's not doing anything with them. You know what I mean? True. I feel like Pickens is a bigger play, and in terms of Philadelphia, because they've gotten such good corner play from Slay and Bradbury, feels like this is a Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth game, right? And so, I have Deontay Johnson at wide receiver 25, mid-tier wide receiver 3. I would say close it out. I have no problem benching Deontay Johnson this week based on the production and the matchup here. I understand what Lawrence is saying. We're both sort of right there. Again, it sort of depends on what else you have. I'm at wide receiver 25.
Yeah, I'm 23.
So, but because we have this premise of keep it open or close it out, and I forgot to do it with Drake London where I'm closing it out just to be clear and clean that up, I will say close it out on Deontay Johnson. Lawrence thinks that you're saying keep it open.
For this week, yeah. But it's like it could be George Pickens, like you said, Freiermuth.
Yeah, he's got 1 game this year with more than 60 receiving yards, right? Anyway, he's the only wide receiver in the NFL with over 60 targets and 0 touchdowns.
So he's due.
He's due, but
in a garbage time game, you're assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see.
Although the Eagles coming off, the Eagles are off the bye. This is, their in-state rival. I feel like the Eagles are out for blood this year. They ain't okay, we're up 30, we're good, everyone bench. They want to embarrass people.
Brandon Cooks coming off a season-low 5 targets, but on the flip side of that, guys, Nico Collins got hurt in that game. So you have to wonder, there's just not a lot of pass-catching targets in this offense, right? Even as good as Dameon Pierce has been in the backfield, he is a run-first, run-second kind of player. Do you think that Collins injury opens up the door for Cooks where you keep this one open?
Yeah, I was actually gonna close this tab right here, but now that Nico Collins is out, that could provide more opportunity, which is crazy to say when we talking about Brandon Cooks. He should have all the opportunity, but now it looks like the offense is funneling through Dameon Pierce, and you're looking at a game here with the Tennessee Titans where the over-under's 40.5, so kind of scary there.
Yeah.
But without Nico Collins, I might just leave it just a little open, just a little.
He's wide receiver 22 for me. I'm with Lawrence here. I'm going to keep it open as well. Titans, over the last 4 weeks, the 3rd worst pass defense in the NFL. They've allowed 70 receiving yards to a wide receiver in 5 straight games. 3 of those games, the guys went over 100 yards. So if you're telling me, hey, there's going to be a wide receiver that's going to go over 70 yards against the Titans, you feel like Brandon Cooks is the most likely person for that as well. Too much talent here. My expectation is that he has a decent game. I'm going to keep it open again. High-end wide receiver 3 for me this week.
Over in Arizona, Robbie Anderson in the fold, DeAndre Hopkins back. Rondale Moore coming off a week where he had 2 targets, 1 catch, 31 yards. Fellas, I got to ask, and Lawrence, I'll start with you. With 2 wide receivers in the fold now, does that hurt more where you're starting to think close this thing out?
So I would say, and we talked about this before the show, about how Rondale Moore had to play more on the outside. If Robbie Anderson gets in this game and he's playing that outside receiver, we get Rondale Moore back to his natural slot position. He could thrive there. Obviously DeAndre Hopkins is going to lead in targets every game, but I don't see that to the tune of 14 targets per game. You're going against the Vikings here. You got a 49 over-under in this game, so we expect some points there. If Rondale Moore could get back to that slot, which he's used to, and Kyler Murray, quite frankly, dinking and dunking, that's all Rondale Moore sees right here. I'm keeping the tab open, baby.
I'm at wide receiver 40, so I'll just, so I want to caveat it there. But I'm with Lawrence here in that if you would normally start Rondale Moore, like if you're in a deeper league where Rondale Moore is part of your consideration, then I would keep it open, right? And so I wouldn't change what I've been doing with Rondale Moore. Chances are you're not in a deep enough league where you've been thinking about it. But yeah, you make a great point there, right? I mean, so 17% of his slots, just 17% of Rondale Moore's routes were in the slot in Week 7 because Robbie Anderson. I mean, AJ Green is like basically
doesn't exist,
right? So it was the human Dortch, Greg Dortch, Hopkins, and Rondale Moore. Dortch can't play outside. So last week they had a very limited package of plays for Robbie Anderson, and so when Robbie Anderson wasn't out there, it was Rondale Moore and DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, Dortch in the slot. When they had those package of plays for Anderson, Rondale Moore moved to the slot. They've had 10 days now to prepare. They're coming off the mini bye, right, because they were the Thursday night game in Week 6. And so the hope here is that Anderson has more of a package of plays, is more familiar with the playbook, and that they use Anderson and Hopkins on the outside more in the slot. It's worth noting that in the last 4 weeks, the Vikings are a bottom 6 pass defense, we expect a lot of scoring to be done in this game. 2 pretty good offenses, 2 defenses that have been inconsistent, to be kind, throughout the year. So I'm keeping it open on Rondale Moore, again with a caveat, if you would normally start him. He's my wide receiver 40 for the week because even though we expect more snaps from Robbie Anderson, I'm not expecting a full complement. I'm not expecting him to play over 90% of the snaps. And to Lawrence's point, this passing offense is still going to funnel through DeAndre Hopkins.
Your Commanders play the Colts this week, and Antonio Gibson somewhat revived here, which is not the best of news if you were hoping Brian Robinson is going to be the workhorse. He has been that on the ground. Not really effective in the pass game. Lawrence, with him looking almost touchdown dependent at this point, where are you at with Brian Robinson?
So, again, I'll keep this open, but you got to temper the expectations here. You got to know that Antonio Gibson is going to be the more efficient back, but with him seeing 47% of the snaps in Week 6 and 7, 17-plus touches in those games, and the Commanders are winning, they are determined to get Brian 50 Cent Robinson that ball. So for this game versus the Colts, who just given up 128 yards to King Henry, the week before that they gave up 140 to J-Rob and ETN. So this could be a nice little spot for him.
Yeah, they're 28th in pass defense over the last 4 weeks, right? I mean,
rush
defense. Rush defense. Like, you can run on the Colts, and so this game should be close. Weirdly, the Commanders are underdogs in this game. Apparently Vegas loves some Sam Ehlinger. But what I would say here is that I agree with Lawrence here, keeping it open. I think he's a touchdown-dependent flex, but I think he gets an opportunity to get in there. I think one of the things that the Commanders saw in Antonio Gibson was like, okay, if we don't make him a workhorse running back, which, by the way, he never was in college. He was a wide receiver. He played a little bit of running back, but, he's kind of a different player, but similar in some respects to kind of a Travis Etienne type in the sense that, they use him as a passing down back, and they used him more that way, and I think keeping him fresher actually made him more effective. He caught the touchdown pass, which is a really nice run there as well. He's had 4 targets. This is Antonio Gibson now. 4 targets each of the last 3 games, and so I think the positive about Antonio Gibson is that whether the Commanders are way down or they're leading, Gibson's always going to have a role in a game in which we don't expect the Commanders to be blown out. whether they'll either be leading or it's close, Robinson will be the early down pounder, and they like him. Again, he's gotten 17 or more touches in consecutive weeks as he comes back from that, from being shot, which is just insane to think about. Right. So anyway, yes, I'm keeping it open on Brian Robinson. I think he gets into the end zone this week. I think he's a viable, flex play.
Over in Cleveland, Kareem Hunt's touches trending the wrong way, guys. And obviously his name has been in some rumors around the trade deadline. He's on an expiring contract. We know he's been vocal before about wanting a new deal before the season started. What do you make of his usage going that way, Lawrence? And is he somebody that you're starting to lean, hey, I can't have him in the lineup at this point with how the last 2 to 3 weeks have gone?
Yeah, this week I got to close that. And the way his touches are going and trending down, it's looking like he about to be traded soon because then they got the bye after the Bengals. But the Bengals are the 5th best team against running backs in fantasy. With the touches going down, I can't feel that confident going in there against the Bengals. Start Nick Chubb if you got him. I wouldn't even worry about it if you got Hunt for this week.
Yeah, I'm with Lawrence here. I'm closing it out on Kareem Hunt. He's had 10 total touches the last 2 games. 10. I mean, basically, averages out to single-digit touches. He's had single-digit fantasy points in 5 of the 7 games he's played so far this year. Single-digit fantasy points combined over the last 2 games here. And so when you think about there's only 1 game this year in which Kareem Hunt has played more than 50% of the snaps and all the trade rumors and everything like that, the only thing that I could see is that maybe they try to showcase him for a trade this week, but in a decent matchup here. But against the Bengals, as you mentioned, Lawrence, they can they don't have a great run defense. They're a bottom 12 run defense over the last month. But yeah, it's nothing. There's nothing in the stats or to the eye test that tells you, hey, you should start Kareem Hunt. It would just be basically, hey, this guy. We know this guy is talented. We've seen it before. His name. Nothing in the production or the usage recently gives you any confidence in using him.
All right, fellas, time for the chaser, and who else but Tom Brady. The struggling Bucks play Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. This one's a little more simple. How nervous are you to start Tom Brady this week? On the short week, all the problems going on there with their offense, really everything combined. Where is that fear factor at?
I'm nervous as hell.
Yeah.
Even against this Ravens defense that gives up a lot of passing yards. They already said Russell Gage, he's out. Not that that's like if it was Chris Godwin, it'd be bigger. But yeah, seeing how they've played against the Panthers, the week before that, the Steelers. Man, I got him ranked at QB 12. Still got him at quarterback 1 just because he's Tom Brady, but I can't ride with it for this week, man. I got to see something. I got to see them get back on track.
I am a QB 7. I'm keeping it open. It is Tom Brady. Again, this may be just, maybe I'm just clinging on to old memories, but he's still, again, we talk about volume all the time, right? He's still throwing it over 40 times a game. He still has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Leonard Fournette out of the backfield. And he's gotten some decent production out of Cade Otton. And no Russell Gage in this one, but hopefully Julio comes back as well. Ravens have been up and down this year in terms of their pass defense so far. They're traveling on a short week. This game is in Tampa Bay on Thursday night. I get it if anyone out there was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. I get it. I get it. But I'm keeping it open for one more week.
I think the bottom line is the Bucs offensive line has got to get it together. It doesn't matter which wide receivers are hurt. That's going to be the most important thing to watch with Tampa Bay going forward. Lawrence, great to have you here. Lord, don't lose. Go follow him. And when we're back, time for a little fantasy trivia on the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster and get the latest injury updates, player news, plus much more delivered right to your phone. Available in your app store today. All right, Barry, time for a little fantasy trivia.
Bar trivia. I haven't done this fantasy yet. Specific. You haven't done it yet.
No,
exactly
I'm excited,
right.
though.
No, I know. It's all right. So again, we're in a bar. We're in an Applebee's here. We miss our Big Apple. So what do you do? We're keeping we like these bar-related premises, and so in this one we're doing a little bar trivia. Here. Okay.
Right.
So here you go. Here's a wide receiver. I'm sorry, actually quarterback. Let's start with the quarterback here. Here's a quarterback, right? Connor, this quarterback has already set a career high for rushing touchdowns in a season at 3.
This quarterback has finished as a top 5 quarterback over the last 4 weeks.
This quarterback plays on a team. You at home are hopefully playing along with us. This quarterback plays on the only team without a 200-yard receiver this season.
It's insane. This quarterback's nickname is based on a currency.
Right. So it's Danny Dimes. It's Daniel Jones.
Danny Dollars.
Yep. Or yeah, good point.
Who is Daniel Jones? As you see Daniel Jones' season stats here. Second in rushing yards right there. Quarterback's 343. I mean, Barry, I got to ask you, what an impressive year from Daniel Jones so far, an impressive year for the Giants. Has he played himself into being a guy you can count on as a high-end streaming option with these
high-end streaming option, high-end streaming option, and low-end just every week starter? I'm at QB8 so far this week, right? I'm like, last week he was the second best quarterback in fantasy, 5th most fantasy points of his career, and you think about this matchup with Seattle. They've given up the 9th most rushing yards per game to opposing quarterbacks. I mean, Kyler Murray had 100 yards against these same Seahawks. They're 30th in scoring defense. They're 25th in pass defense. The emergence of Rondell Robinson, Saquon Barkley still healthy. Bellinger is a loss, but still, like it's not pretty. But by hook or by crook, they're getting kind of production from this no-name group of wide receivers. And again, I'm bullish on Rondell Robinson. So yes, Daniel Jones. It's not always pretty, but especially because the rushing gives him such a floor, I think he's a high-end streamer, and I actually think he's a viable low-end QB1 the rest of the way.
It feels like without playmakers, he's been forced to run this year, and it's working if you're using him in fantasy, and it's working for the New York Giants in key spots.
Yeah, Brian Daboll's doing basically what he did. He's doing a great job, obviously, and more importantly, you sort of see early Josh Allen. I mean, again, I'm not comparing Daniel Jones talent-wise to Josh Allen, but just in terms of the style of play that you think about the Bills, early in Josh Allen's career, it was a lot of this. It was a lot of kind of running around and trying to make plays happen because they didn't have much. They didn't have Stephon Diggs. They didn't have Gabriel Davis back then. And so there was a lot of whatever and Cole Beasley. And so feels like yes, Daniel Jones starting to become whatever. He was my fantasy ride or die 2 years ago. So I was right, guys.
Yeah, just took a little time to marinate.
Took a little time. You can't box me into these time frames.
It's like a fine wine.
All right, so here we go. Why don't you start us off with the next, this is a wide receiver.
This wide receiver set a career high in receiving yards in Week 7, but was only started in 42% of Yahoo leagues.
Okay. This wide receiver likes to do a little razzle-dazzle because this wide receiver is tied for the most passing yards among all wide receivers.
This wide receiver has 455 receiving yards in 7 games this season, the same exact amount as T. Higgins.
When a teammate was asked about how open this player was in Week 7, his response was booty butt naked open, that's pretty open. It's pretty open.
This wide receiver is Tyler Boyd, and that was T. Higgins that said he was booty butt naked open. I mean, if Joe Burrow is leading the league in passing yards, should Tyler Boyd be in your starting lineups every single week at this point?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
5 different games with 4 or fewer receptions so far this year. He's played fewer than 82% of the snaps in 5 out of 7 games. In games in which he doesn't score a touchdown, he's averaging just 8 fantasy points per game. This was a really nice game for obviously Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals passing offense, but they give so much volume to Joe Mixon. You know that Chase and Higgins need to get theirs. I'm not ready to get into the idea that Tyler Boyd, certainly a very nice game for him, but he's not a fantasy starter for me just yet. I am at wide receiver 43 this week.
All right, the next one. This wide receiver in 2018 scored the 3rd most fantasy points by a wide receiver through the first 7 games of a season in NFL history.
Okay. This wide receiver is on pace for his fewest receiving touchdowns since 2017.
His 9.8 yards per reception this season is a career low.
His teammate is famous for starting the gritty touchdown celebration.
Lamp of the century.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, if you still need it, it's Adam Thielen.
Right.
No surprise here. Vikings coming out of the bye week. Barry, where do you have Thielen this week, and what are your expectations for the Vikings pass offense right now?
Have him as a top 30 play, wide receiver 29 for me. He's now had 15 or more fantasy points in three straight games, right? He's scored a touchdown in in 3 games this year. You like the matchup with Arizona, which is the bottom 12 pass defense over the last month. He's playing over 95% of the snaps in pretty much every game this year except for one. Little touchdown dependent, but that's okay. Again, we like this passing offense. He's the number 2 guy in a high-profile, high-prolific offense. I'm in on Adam Thielen this week against Arizona as a top 30 play.
All right, the last one here. This running back holds his team's franchise record for most rushing yards by a rookie in a single season.
This running back has double-digit rush attempts in every game he's played so far this season.
But this running back has fewer rushing yards than Daniel Jones.
Man.
And get this one, Barry. Less rushing touchdowns than Braxton Berrios this season.
This past Sunday on Football Night in America right here on NBC and Peacock, I called him, quote, the biggest bust in fantasy football.
Who is Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers? This one's pretty simple here, Barry. Can fantasy managers keep starting Najee at this point?
They may have to because they don't have any other reason to. Like, I am outside my top 20, which is shocking for a guy that was drafted as high as he was. He comes in at running back 22 for me. If there's a positive to hang your hat on, he's still getting decent volume, 15 or more touches in 5 out of 7 games so far this year, including 18-plus in 4 out of 6 games. And the Eagles have allowed a rushing touchdown in 5 out of 7 games this year. Now, we don't expect them to be in this game. They're double-digit underdogs in this game. The Steelers are to Philadelphia as well. He's had single-digit fantasy points in 5 of 7 games this year. So he's really touchdown dependent. There's optimism that he could score a touchdown here, but, he's really touchdown dependent. He's not involved in the passing game nearly as much as you would like him to. Fewer than 70 rushing yards in every game this year, but 1. Looked a little bit better against Miami. Comes in and running back 22 for me. So, again, he's a flex. He's a flex this week.
Are you surprised that things haven't improved for him since Kenny Pickett took over? It felt like with Trubisky, this offense just was stuck in the mud entirely.
Again, we talked about this. It's just a brutal stretch of the season schedule-wise for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a bye next week after this one, and then I think hopefully things turn around. They figure out what they want to do with their offense and try to get that figured out.
Was he somebody that what would your trade expectations be if you have a desperate team in your league that's dying for a running back? You're obviously selling low on Najee Harris considering where you drafted him. But what would it take for you to be like, okay, I'll move on from him? What tier of players are we in, name value wise?
Like, if I had running back depth, literally anyone that's usable.
Wow. Like a wide receiver 3 level player.
Yeah, exactly. But but yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 20 play. I mean, I think I would want a top 20 player at the position because he's still a volume-based running back, and there's so few of them in the NFL. We have to expect that out of the bye, easier schedule, Pickett, knowing the offense is under Pickett, that things will improve for Najee Harris. Nowhere to go but up for him. Nowhere to go but up for this podcast as well. We're back right after this.
The NFL season is here, and the NBC Sports Predictor app is giving you a shot at winning $100,000 by entering Sunday Night 7's free contest between the Packers and the Bills. So if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. $550,000 handed out so far, 25,000 winners. Last call. What better to do than our predictions for the SN7 Predictor app? Total points in the game from me. Barry, I'm going to go with 48 to 51 total points in this game. I don't know if we'll get full shootout territory, but the Bills are in this game.
The Bills are in this game. They're at home. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They're coming off of the bye. Be a huge crowd there. And Buffalo, a reminder, we will be there live with Fantasy Football pregame. So come out Sunday morning and see us if you're in the Buffalo area in the parking lot of Bills Stadium. Question for me from Sunday Night 7 is how many receiving yards will Stephon Diggs get? There's a bunch of different tiers as well as you see it there. Look, Probably the answer is probably 110 to 124, but I'm going to take the 125 or more. It just gives me the widest range here. He's had over 100 receiving yards in 4 out of 6 games this year. Justin Jefferson had 184 receiving yards against these Packers in week number 1. 27% target share for Stephon Diggs. So just give me the widest range of outcomes there, 125 plus. Listen, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. It is closing time for Lawrence Jackson. Thank you, Lawrence. For Connor Rogers, I'm Matthew Berry. We will see you here tomorrow. It's Love Day, Hate Day tomorrow as well. So check that out. Thank you so much. All right, that's it. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.